Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Ed Hathorn. I worked down here at the Harbormaster Department years ago. Currently, I'm a lieutenant with the Beverly Police Department. I appreciate it's kind of awestruck to see everyone down here. But to start tonight's event, I'd like to step off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to this flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I'd like to turn over the ceremony now for a welcome to Mayor Mike Cahill. Mayor, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming out. I want to thank our fire department's honor guard, so many city officials, city employees, elected officials, users and lovers of the waterfront. I'm sure there are some soccer people here. So I'll just share a couple brief thoughts. I first met Dan because he coached my nephew in under 12 soccer. Maybe it was under 14, but the point is, I first met him and the kids absolutely loved him. I know that he loved, well, we share a love of soccer. I know that he loved the game. I know that he loved coaching. And the kids who played for him and their parents always felt lucky and blessed that they got to know Dan and they got to have him as a mentor and a guiding person as they were kind of finding their own way. So I'll stay with the soccer for just a minute. Several years ago, I had some cousins over from County Cork, Ireland. My cousins, Seamus and Will Joyce. Seamus the dad, Will the son. And we went into the Indo one night, and Dan was there. There was a soccer game on the TV, and he came over to say hi. He loved it that my cousins are actually from Cork, and he tried out his accent on them. No, right? He loved his Irish and British accents. But when he found out that my nephew Will has been a Liverpool fan since he was 3, that made it. So we had a lot of fun that night. I like Liverpool, but man, did Dan love Liverpool. So we had a lot of fun that night. As mayor, and I got to work with Dan for several years as mayor. I just have to say, he was an amazing team player. He was a great leader. Everybody who worked with him loved him. And I know that's why everybody's here today. You couldn't know Dan without respecting him, admiring him, and just flat out loving him. He was a wonderful human being. I feel lucky and blessed that I got to work with him for several years. And I know that so many of so many of his coworkers who became friends felt the same, feel the same. I want to especially say that everybody here who had the chance to work with him in the Harbormaster's office and be mentored by Dan and befriend him and get to travel part of your own professional journey and growth with him, I know you especially feel that. So again, thank you for everybody who's here, everybody who made sure that this was going to happen, everybody who stepped up and said, let's honor Dan the right way. So thank you all for that, and I'm just glad and happy to be part of it here today. I do want to now turn to Reverend Mike Otero from St. Francis of Assisi, who will come up with benediction and then a blessing of the building. Father?
Please bow your heads. Father in heaven, we thank you for the Daniel G. McPherson Harborcenter, which we are opening today in his honor. Bless this building and all those who use it in Daniel's name. Grant that all the activities that take place here will build up a spirit of community among us and lead us to the well-being and safety of all our citizens who use these waterways. Father, we praise you and we ask your blessing through our Lord. Amen. And now I will sprinkle this in his name.
Thank you very much, Reverend. I now call to the podium Captain Bill McHugh, the Salem Harbor Master. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming. I would also like to thank the city's administration, as well as all the people that supported this very appropriate and deserved dedication in Dan's memory. It's an honor for me to stand before you today and offer some remarks about Dan. Many probably do not know that Dan was an assistant harbor master in Salem before taking the job here in Beverly. That was long before my tenure and after he worked as a commercial fisherman. From his years of experience working on the water, Dan recognized the job required a skill set beyond someone that may be just familiar with boats. In fact, even with his vast experience in the water, Dan went through what was at the time a new and somewhat lengthy training curriculum and was among the first group in the Commonwealth to achieve certification to legally serve as a harbor master in Massachusetts. He also served as the president of the North Shore Harbor Masters Association during a time when mandated changes were being implemented, and from his post as president, he helped guide others through and deliver training. For me, next door in Salem, with a shared area of responsibility, Dan was a knowledgeable and trusted public safety partner on the water. Things usually don't go too wrong when it's sunny and 70 degrees. More often, incidents on the water occur during inclement weather and periods of darkness. Anyone that calls the water their workplace knew Dan was monitoring Channel 16 day and night. I'm pretty certain he slept with the radio speaker next to his ear. He was always ready to go and bring his A game when he heard that recognizable panic in a boater's voice. Once when Dan was on one of his holidays in Ireland, we received a distress or mayday call. I believe it was a boat taking on water out by the islands. Just minutes after the call came in, I was underway from Salem with my crew. The phone rang. It was Dan from across the pond, asking me what I had and informing me that his crew were on the way to help. He never divulged how he got word of the call, how word of the call reached him abroad. But that was Dan, never off watch. Dan knew the job and exemplified how it should be done. I'll go back to my 70s and sunny scenario. I know many look at the job and say, wow, what a great job, get paid to cruise around in a boat. Not too hard to take. But the job is not as glorious as some may think if you're doing it right, and Dan always was doing it the right way. Fortunately, Dan was a mentor to many here today on how to stand a watch, and they continued on in public safety, so his dedication to service lives on through them. Dan is still missed on the water. He stood a good watch until the final strike of the bell, and from my perspective, the dedication of this facility in Dan's memory is an important gesture to recognize a man that served the local maritime community with unwavering commitment. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Captain McHugh. I next call to the podium Sergeant Eric Abrahamson of the Beverly Police Department.
Good evening, everyone. That's generally about as appropriate as I get. I didn't need these either when I started here. Good evening, honored guests. I want to thank everybody for all their contributions for making this happen and making this unbelievable monument to Dan's memory a reality. At this moment, I'm proud to say that everyone here is a part of McPherson's Navy. And if you know, you know. This day, we're all gathered here to celebrate all things Dan, who was so many things to so many people. He was a son, a brother, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a boss, a mentor, a friend, and a coach, and so much more. This was easier the first time. I am part of the Beverly Harbor Master graduating class of 2000. In 1996, as a senior at Salem State University, I met Dan McPherson. Dan allowed me the pleasure of doing my college internship under his direction. That was the beginning of my relationship with a man I feel I owe a debt to for my career in public safety. My internship and free labor earned the respect of Dan and led to a job offer to be an assistant harbor master. I was very excited. Those of you who know, if you haven't ever laid on your back in the gravel at Jubilee Yacht Club or a similar location on a raw April day, holding a sander above your face, sanding the bottom of the boat until you look like a coal miner, I highly recommend it. It builds character. We bonded over our mutual love of the Patriots, working hard, and love of the water, and our enjoyment of late 90s Beverly Police day shift radio traffic. Dan had a vision for Beverly Harbor and for his department in a scope never before seen in this city. Not only that, Dan's absolute unmatched devotion to listening to the Marine radio and police radio will never be duplicated. Dan's devotion to the safety of Beverly's commercial fishermen and recreational boaters was unrivaled by any area agency except the United States Coast Guard. Dan listened to the Marine and police radios for calls for service 24/7, 365, and apparently, I learned today, from around the globe. He listened while he was home, while awake and asleep, while in his car, when on duty and off, which was never. What Dan did every day on his own, the United States Coast Guard does with 2 stations and multiple shifts of radio coverage. Dan's vision was to have a highly trained, highly motivated department with the most modern equipment available. When he started in Beverly, he took over a ragtag group with little to no equipment, training, and a boat that was incapable of providing public safety to a community with 12.5 miles of coastline. Dan's vision would later see him create a fleet of boats. The 25-foot Boston Whaler became the Iron Man of the fleet here. One winter, we drilled holes in the hull, and it literally drained water out of it the whole winter after haul out. That boat was a hand-me-down, but Dan made it work. It took elbow grease and a lot of maintenance, new electronics, new pumps, new lines, new tow rope, engines, gas tanks, paint, decals, fiberglass work. Most of the work was done here in-house by Dan and the assistant harbor masters at great savings to the city. When the work was done and the 25 went back in the water with a fresh American flag flying on the mast, you were proud to work here. Dan never saw a piece of junk he didn't like if it could float. At the time, Dan used a military surplus program with great success and benefit to the city. His use of this program resulted in several working vessels for the city over the years, as well as obtaining tools and other usable equipment at great savings, as it was all free. One of these boats was specifically outfitted because it could fit under the railroad bridge and Hall Whitaker Bridge at any tide, because Dan was always thinking about the safety of others and his department's improved response. The only cost was the elbow grease, the assistance, and he happily applied. The drawback was sometimes in a surplus lot, you may have had to take half a room full of camouflage flak jackets and backpack frames with no packs you had no use for. Back in the day, those were stored in the old McDonald's building that used to be behind us, where they took on a weird cheeseburger odor. When you work for Dan under his vision and tutelage, you learn law enforcement and Chapter 90B as he coordinated training with the Beverly Police Department. Dan's reward for hard work was often sending young assistant harbor masters to the Reserve Police Academy. This was a huge deal for a young person interested in a law enforcement career. Under Dan, you learned how to safely tow a boat. You learned about boat maintenance and repairs. You learned how to use the latest in electronic equipment, such as radar, GPS navigation, depth sounders, and radio direction finders. You learned first aid, and you were trained to be a first responder. You learned search and rescue as he coordinated training with the Beverly Fire Department, and dive team, and brought in professionals as well to teach surf and shoreline rescue techniques. Often being underway, you also needed to be trained in using the onboard pumps to either pump out a boat taking on water or fight a fire. Under Dan's watch, the lobster boat races during Beverly's homecoming became a consistently contended and celebrated event. Dan instituted, along with the Beverly Police Department, the first ever combined patrol with both departments operating personal watercraft. These craft were able to assist in search and rescue operations at the time as far away as Singing Beach in Manchester. Dan also worked with the local power squadron to run safe boating classes in Beverly. I had the pleasure to teach a few of those, where I may have learned to speak in front of people. For the first time in Beverly, Beverly Harbor was able to host transient boaters on moorings Dan placed in the harbor, allowing people from outside the area to come here and safely tie up for a night or two. The Beverly Harbormaster Department proudly assisted with the security of the United States Constitution during his visit to Marblehead Harbor in 1997. Dan also made sure the Harbormaster Department had a working website with a number of helpful informational links in the late 90s. Dan McPherson was a leader among his peers as he served as the president of the North Shore Harbormaster Association. Dan worked in that capacity diligently, developing a website for the North Shore Harbormasters Association in the 90s and working towards uniform standards and training requirements to professionalize the position of harbormaster in the state. Dan even knew Santa and made him a regular visitor to the harbor. I treasure my relationship I had with Dan. I was a young kid willing to work hard, and I knew I wanted to be a police officer. Through my work ethic and willingness to work, he put up with me. He put up with me. When Dan needed a night, I worked a night. When Dan needed weekends, I worked weekends. And somewhere along the way, as everybody who knows me, I began to tell him what I thought about things. He respected what I had to say, and to the guys who probably remember some of our exchanges, we probably sounded like an old married couple. Not that married couples argue. Dan, as a leader, had my back. He had my back and supported my efforts trying to keep Beverly Harbor a safer place, because I was an extension of him out in the boat. He had my back when I made the newspaper as a part-time nobody doing a part-time / full-time job, and he had my back in the paper in black and white, which in the context of a public safety career, having supervisors that support you is an unbelievable asset to everybody that's ever held a post or a badge or anywhere. We all know what it means to have supportive leaders. Those who knew me then don't laugh out loud, as it's not a stretch to say the only gray I had ever heard of at the time was battleship gray, and I painted with it, and that is it. But Dan supported and trusted his people, and if Dan didn't feel that way with you, you found yourself off the schedule. I even ended up with a Marine radio in my Jeep at the time and a Marine radio at my house. I was living with my mother at the time, and I had a Marine radio rigged up and an antenna hanging out my bedroom window. I was a little Dan. Dan had come to trust me and offered me the position of Deputy Harbor Master. There was no such thing at the time. Dan had found the money within his own budget to pay me a salary and provide me with health insurance and benefits. It was something that I will be forever grateful for. When I left for the police academy in May of 2000, I left a job behind that I loved with a boss, friend, and mentor, Dan McPherson, that I love working for and with. I left with some new terms, such as dubba, that I had never heard before. For the in-house jokes, there's three-part Timinator, the classic double eyebrow raise, the phrase, never a dull moment. By that time, Dan was one of my closest friends and someone I think back on to this day. I am thankful he gave me and so many others a start to their many successful careers in public safety. Dan McPherson provided the start for men and women that went on to work for the following agencies. The Beverly Police Department has 15 officers serving as lieutenants, sergeants, patrolmen, and reserves. The Beverly Fire Department has 6 firemen serving as lieutenants and firefighters. The Beverly Harbor Master Department, 13 assistants worked for Dan. The Essex County Sheriff's Department has 2 former Beverly Harbor Masters. The Merrimack Police Department has 1. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms has 1. The United States Air Marshals have 1. Rockport Police have 1. MedFlight, a flight medic, 1. Salem Police have 3, serving the positions of lieutenant, sergeants, and patrol. Salem Fire has a formerly Beverly Harbor Master, as does Canton Fire, Burlington Fire. The Dutch National Police have a former Beverly Harbor Master, as does the Raleigh Police Department, the Gloucester Fire Department, the Bend, Oregon Fire Department, the Marblehead Harbor Master Department, the Georgetown Police Department, and the Boxford Police Department all have former Beverly Harbor Masters brought into the profession by Dan McPherson. So if we have any wrestling fans in the audience, I will leave you with this. Finally, we have all come back to the Daniel G. McPherson Harborcenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I don't really know how I'm going to be able to pass that up. First of all, I'd like to extend a large thanks to those that made this possible today. Mayor Mike Cahill, our Beverly City Council, Beverly Harbor Management Authority, our Department of Public Works, of course, the Beverly Harbor Master Department, the Harborcenter Building Dedication Committee, and all that turned this from a concept to the wonderful memorial that it is today. I'd also like to extend an extra thank you to Jim Tagnazzi from Beverly DPW, Eric Barber from the Engineering Department, as well as Councilor Todd Rotundo, who unfortunately couldn't make it today. Just reflecting a little bit on what Eric said, when I came here, I would say 26 years ago, as a very young person willing to do a job, ready to work, and wanting to save the world, Dan offered me that job. However, when he turned and said, I have a pump boat for you to work on, I was willing to take the challenge. For those that don't know what a pump boat is, that's what pumps the septic sewer out of all your boats. But with that, in reflecting to what was said before, he knew if you took the time, energy, and effort, if you were really doing the hard work, if he gave you a boat and you use attention to detail and you worked that job, he would give you opportunities. Those opportunities led to him mentoring you to those traits of a leader, that attention to detail, that hard work, all that stuff that at the time we felt maybe his standards were a little too high and we maybe didn't agree exactly with what he said. But now towards the further of my career, we understand now, just like he was the coach on that soccer field, how he was coaching us and mentoring us to what we could become. For that, Dan, thank you very much. The honor of being down here today and seeing the impact that Dan had on me, my coworkers, and all that are here is awe-inspiring. And for that, thank you. With that, I would like to present, or have the honor guard present a flag. One of Dan's greatest things outside of the waterfront, outside of soccer, was who he called his little buddy. Adriana O'Brien, granddaughter to Dan, his most cherished person, is who he talked about all the time and he was spending time with. And for that, we have flown a flag here at the Harborcenter during the dedication, and we'd like to present that flag to Adriana. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming, spending their evening here tonight. There are some light refreshments that are being served inside. And also, please take the time, if you haven't been down here, and seen the wonderful building, now properly named the Daniel G. McPherson Harborcenter. Please take a look at what it's become. Thank you again for your time. Have a wonderful evening.